Okay, hi everybody. Welcome. Thanks for tuning in at whatever time and space you are tuning in from. I'm Alexis. This is Star Service TV, first episode of 2022. So I'm just going to start with a quick calling in and building a container for us. So feel free to join along or not, whatever feels right for you at this time. So I call out to the ancestors, to those who lived and died well, who met the challenges of their times and innovated, and brought everything good and true and beautiful into our lines. I call out to you, ancestral helping spirits, all those that are true guides, that are holding a piece of essential wisdom that is needed at this time and are willing to show up needing nothing from us, only here to help us, only here to give back to us, the living, so that we may complete the circuit between you, the living, between us, the living, you, the ancestors, and the descendants, those who are coming. Please help us to complete that circuit well. Please help this offering to be a part of that circuit, to make connection between us who are living and those who are not, and all the spirit help that we need, and the energy and experience that we may need within the space of this call in order to go forward into our lives in a new way, in a good way, in a way that aligns with the earth. I call out to the spirits of each direction, to the east and the south and the west and the north. I call out to the spirits below us and the spirits above us. And I call out to the spirits that would help us and gather here with us in the center of this call. I call out to earth and air and fire and water, you most ancient elements, you who hold the wisdom of what it means to be in form in a way that is in balance, in a way that honors the truth of our essence. Please flow through us and with us on this call. And I call out to each of our helping spirits in all the many forms and faces that they take. I ask you to be with us and lean in with us and stand behind us at our backs so that we may have all the resources that we need and maybe don't even know to ask for, so that we may hear what needs to be heard and say what needs to be said within the space of this call. And again, go forward in a way that is good and true and beautiful for all life. And so as we gather that spirit help around us, I invite you to envision that anyone who tunes into this call at any time is stepping into a circle. And imagine in your mind's eye and in your belly's knowing how that circle arranges itself in non-local space-time. Imagine the elements gathered around us, particularly the fire coming into ignition in the center there, helping us to hold this space, helping us to make it sacred and make it warm, helping us to connect. And as you imagine that circle, imagine it big enough to hold anyone that would show up at any time, whatever they may need to carry in with them. And imagine it strong enough and resilient enough to keep us safe within this circle so that we may take a risk in opening up to experiencing something new. And as you agree with yourself and make the choice to step into the circle, do so. Feel for any change within your body as you step into that energy with me, with all of us, with spirit gathered around and holding us. And just take a moment to notice how the spirit help is always available to you. And I call out to the spirits of the land where each of us reside, and the great spirits of the land where each of us reside. And I ask for your continued guidance and grounding and support. Help us to bring a solid foundation to this work in this day. And as we step into the circle, I give deep honoring and deep gratitude to all the spirit help that has gathered around to hold us in this work. Thank you. When you feel ready, you can open your eyes, make a choice to be here now, and join me in the call. Okay, welcome. So here we are. Just some energetic hygiene if you feel like you want to leave early. It's totally cool to bow out and to, really acknowledge the energies that are resourcing me and sharing this work. But I also am, committing to handling that procedural stuff myself. on a more overarching level. So don't worry about it. If you are just like, fuck this, I'm going to turn this off. Yeah, not a big deal. Thank you, Spirit, for giving us all of that magical resilience and flexibility. So this is a series that I'm going to do. I'm hoping to do it monthly and hoping to stick to that. If it feels some months like I really want to amp it up, I may. And if it feels like I need to take another break, I probably will too. No big deal, probably, for anyone. So my intentions are to share from the teachings that I'm learning to embody, and also particularly the parts of the teachings that I'm actually learning to teach with like the blessing and support of my teachers and a small but mighty community of teachers in training that's forming around these teachings. Because I think they're really important and they've really impacted my life and made my life really just like astoundingly good. Even amidst the things that are getting, astoundingly more challenging as the years go on and as the months and days sometimes go on. I feel really resourced and I feel really resilient, and I have a lot of fun. And I'm just noticing how that's not necessarily the case for a lot of people of my generation, a lot of people both older and younger than me. And I really want to share what helps me to stay in balance and stay in right relationship with myself while adapting to wildly unpredictable circumstances. And so I'm doing my best to share this stuff in the only way that I know how, given the platforms that I have. So I'm asking for donations for all those that attend these classes, whether live or not. The donation is just that. It's something that feels, right for you to share, that feels like healthy for you to share. Sacrifice $10 is suggested. That's really, not a ceiling or a floor. It's just so that, the energy is flowing and I continue to have the resources that I need to continue on my studies and continue on my path of sharing this work. If you want to book a session personally, please reach out via email, alexisblairpenney@gmail.com. You can find all that info on my Instagram or my website or my link tree and all of that stuff, or in the YouTube info that I'll post when I post this recording. And I'll also just note that I'm available as well. I'll probably be teaching maybe a small group class in the fall, but I'd love it if some folks are like, actually, I really want to do this in a class setting. I don't think I can either afford or commit to something one-on-one. But if you just voice your availability and interest, I can gather a small group together if there are enough folks that feel like they're interested in learning some of this work, because that's really the best way to learn it. Me shouting into the void of YouTube is probably, there's a limited capacity for this, but it's what I got right now, so I'm going to do it. So let's just like get into our bodies before I go further. And I'm just going to assume that you're sitting today like I am. Maybe in other iterations we'll do something a little more physical, but for now, just please give me the grace that if you find that your physical abilities are different than what I'm suggesting or what I am imagining, that you don't let your capacity be limited by my imagination and the limitations of my vocabulary. So please just move and do what you're able to do. And just take a moment to notice your feet on the ground and notice your butt on your seat. If that's how things are, if you want to stand, you can. If you want to lie down, you can. And just notice your breath as it's coming in and out. And just take a moment to just scan through the body and just notice anything that's asking for your attention, and give acknowledgement to anything that's really, really asking for your attention. And feel free to stay with something that feels more right for you. But if you want to continue with me, just see if you can draw your head back in the sense of not pulling forward towards the screen, but actually just allow your head to kind of find its native location on top of your spine. You might swish your head or your chin from side to side, or kind of do some slow circles. Whatever feels helpful for you to facilitate finding where your head wants to be right now, as if you were relaxed. You can't necessarily force things to relax, but what would it feel like if you could just imagine relaxation, particularly if you've spent a lot of time in front of a screen today, like most of us? You might rock back and forth from your butt all the way up to your head, or if you're standing, from the balls of your feet to the heels and back and forth from there. And then maybe sway and drift from side to side. And as it feels right for you, you can start to give some slow circles from whatever you consider your base in this moment. Just pick a direction and move with that, and just notice the muscles that need to move. And notice if there's muscles that are stressing or tensing to do this that maybe don't really need to. See if those can just be given permission to soften. Notice if your breath can guide you through these gentle circles, and maybe when you feel right to do so, you can switch directions. And then notice if the circling wants to move into any other areas. You might want to start swishing your shoulders, one and then the other, forward and back. You might move your arms out and just give some gentle swishing through your hands, your wrists, your fingers, your elbows. And you might want to bend forward to the degree that feels comfortable and back. Just give your spine a little movement. Imagine that as you move, the blood flow is just kind of gently rinsing what's going on within you. Just thinking of restoring natural flow, whatever is natural for you relative to this moment. If it's gotten a little stuck or stagnant. And if you have been sitting for a while, you might consider getting up and maybe jiggling, wiggling. I actually haven't been sitting that much today, so I'm kind of comfortable to sit and do my jiggling and wiggling from my seat. And you might go up and down. Just notice that as you go up and down, you've got so much support underneath you. The earth ain't going nowhere. No, I'm going to come to a, gentle stillness, but as you continue to listen to the call, feel free to participate by moving at any time. Feel free to get up and walk around or do your thing, or let your body express things. Also, you're probably going to hear dogs bark because I live with 2 dogs. So sorry about that. Hopefully it's not disruptive. So we'll move into a grounding practice now. Grounding is a choice. That's the most foundational thing to share about grounding, and it has to do with our energy. So real quick, what's this thing about energy? What is energy? Why don't I stick to teaching body stuff? Because I taught that for so long, and I think that body stuff is really important. And part of the reason why I'm shifting to teaching more about energy is because energy affects body stuff. And I taught body stuff for so long and practiced physical movement for so long in many different modalities that I would consistently find places of stuckness, of woundedness, of hurtness, all kinds of dissonance within my body practice that my physical practices didn't have the capacity to fix for me or address. And some of them didn't even really have the capacity or language to give me words to describe them. And sometimes teachers of those traditions would actually just give me blank stares or encourage me to do 10 more push-ups or something like that, to do some more chaturanga, in a vinyasa framework, which that makes sense. If you're teaching a physically rooted modality, it makes sense for teachers to guide you consistently back to the practice. But the thing about most movement practices that are coming from world traditions, particularly stuff like yoga, qigong, stuff like that, kung fu, it doesn't come from a just materialist framework. And so if we look at it as just materialist, we're actually missing a big piece of the tradition. So energy for me is a word that I use to stand in for something we can engage with that gives us access to multiple relationships between differing components of who we are, and something that affects all things, all aspects of who we are. So the way I organize it is mind, body, heart/emotions, or emotional body is another way to think of that, and spirit, which is sort of that ineffable soul stuff, that kind of thing. And a lot of people think of energy and spirit stuff as fairly synonymous, but within my work, I actually get to like refine it a little differently. So I plant energy right in the center as being the thing that touches everything potentially. And you can iron in on just emotional energy, just like you can iron in on purely physical energy. And it's really important at certain times in process to do that, to get really clear about what's just a thought form versus what is actually like an emotional pattern. But the thing about our reality is that it's all connected anyway. So energy is the place where, for me and what I've been taught and experienced, I can go in, and by learning to work with my body's energy, my personal energy, I can learn to engage all of those different bodies and the relationships between them and how they interrelate, and engage them in a way that actually helps me to take better responsibility for it, since it's mine. And that's a big one right now, right? Because a lot of us are struggling to claim that boundary between mine and not mine, both with the collective and our culture at large and all the fucked up shit that's going on in that, and then maybe with our family of origin and that, and the ways that those intersect, etc. So that's my why about energy, is that it touches everything. And so what I would encourage you is to imagine that you have an imaginal capacity that is innate within you to engage with your own energy and the energy of the field as well, the larger energetic ecology, we could call it. And that there's a way to learn to do that that's not overly woo-woo or opaque or mystical, or relies on a lot of belief or a lot of trust of some kind of guru figure, or that kind of thing. Or it doesn't also rely on me making my Rhonda Britton voice. It's just energy, right? So imagine that your imagination gives you one of the primary pathways to your energy, and that you already have the capacity to work with it. You maybe just haven't done so before in this exact way. And that in doing these practices, actually over time, you can learn how to do it in a way that has a lot of integrity and really helps you cultivate a deeper sense of truth going forward that you can carry into all of your life, including like very physical things like rent, bills, etc., which of course we also now have an energy in themselves. So I invite you to join me in this grounding practice where we will connect our energy to the energy of the earth and just let that resource our energy body. And it's really simple. And the energy body that we're working with is a really simple structure. Just think of it as your body, the center channel of energy running from the top to the bottom. And imagine that that's also meant to be connected and in relationship to the earth. So the center of the earth, the heart, the energetic heart of the earth, where all of the relationships of the whole earth being are bundled and imaginally available as a symbolic language that we can access, and with the divine, which is like the opposite of the earth to a certain degree, like this true yang to the earth's true yin. So this place of light and radiance and heat and warmth that is all the way up in the heavens. The highest power is one kind of common neologism that you hear, in a lot of different traditions. God is usually like the face that we put on the divine. So we're going to reach through that all. So we're just going to ground real quick and let that stuff resource our energy. The other piece that we'll mention is the boundaries, which is just the field, the circular kind of membrane around you that is meant to delineate between yours and not yours. So just join in, and feel free to do it wrong and fuck it up and not get it. And don't worry if you don't see anything. We're looking for more of a felt sense, which could be taste, sound, texture, color, emotion, music, whatever. There's a lot of ways that will show up for you. So I invite you to close your eyes if that's available for you to do so. And I invite you to again return to your breathing and return to that place that we establish where the butt and the head and the spine between them are in relatively supportive and neutral relationship. And just imagine that you have the choice to do with your energy whatever you will it to do in this moment. And so I invite you to see your energy, however that appears to you, as some kind of a sphere or a color or a texture, and just let that gather itself back into your head from wherever it might have been today. And maybe moving with your breath, let your next breath draw your energy, your sphere of your awareness down into your chest, around your heart center. And with your next breath, draw your energy down into your belly, the bowl of your pelvis, kind of like the procreative center. And from that procreative center, begin to imagine that you have a lily right there in sort of a pond of your pelvis. And let your imagination start to flesh out how that lily looks and feels and is. You may imagine its pad floating on the surface of the pond. Above the pad, there is a flower. See if you can feel into or even smell that flower as it's resting there on the surface of the pond, soaking up oxygen and light. And imagine that below the pad, the leaves, there's actually this structure that begins underneath the surface of the water. And as you touch into that lily that is yours, that is an expression of your energy in this moment, invite the lily to show you how it grounds, how it connects to the earth. Imagine the weightiness and the gravity of the earth gently tugging on the root structure of that lily, and start to follow that with your consciousness as it moves down towards the base of the pond. Follow it into the dirt and the muck and the fish poop and all the things that keep a pond alive. And let gravity and the lily's own knowing of how to ground as the wise many millions year old plant that it is, plunge you even deeper through the muck at the bottom of the pond and start to explore the texture of the earth below you. Now, if you're up in a building that has many floors, imagine that root system just going all the way down through all the many floors. Don't worry about anything below you. You're just going right to the earth. But you may envision as you pass through anything that's made by a human, like pipes and wires, and basements, and just gently pass through that stuff. Pass through until you start to encounter a layer that we can consider the bedrock. It's below just the dirt and the humus and all of the decomposing stuff of soil. Moving into those more solidified, more rocky layers that have existed for a long time below us. Touch into that bedrock there and just start to notice the quality as your root system plunges itself into that bedrock and comes into relationship with the bedrock. Depending on where you are, it may be limestone or shale or flint. Don't worry too much about it if you don't know about what the bedrock is below you, where you are in this planet right now. Just feel into the energetic qualities. How does it feel to touch bedrock? What does it taste like, smell like? What song might it sing? And as you root into the bedrock, invite the gravity of the earth and the knowing of your lily's root to plunge even deeper through the bedrock, all the way towards the earth's heart, moving as quickly as you need to find that super dense, super heavy, super essential place of true yin, of darkness, stillness, silence, and solitude that lives and pulses and slows at the center of the earth. Now, you may actually see this as a silvery pool, or maybe it's a little more naturalistic like water, or it could even be pure black like oil. But just invite your imagination and your felt sense to really feel into what the center of the earth holds for you. And really encourage yourself as you're noticing what's there to tune in to that frequency that really carries that solidity, that stability, that cool, wet essence of all that is below, all that is dark in the healthiest, purest, most necessary sense. And if it feels right, you can make an acknowledgement, maybe give a little bow with your root system, and then plunge right into that. And as you plug in, just notice all the flow happening between your body and the body of the earth via this cord that you've created, which we can call our grounding cord or your root system. Notice that there's flow going both up and down now of that silvery, watery, oily, earthy, true yin essence energy. Let that energy bring up consistency and form. Let it bring up alignment and fertility. Let it bring up that deep below the belly earth knowing of truth. And as it flows into your body, let it wash and rinse and tonify and purify and just restore your bones and your muscles and your organs and your energy centers and your spine to essence. Like plugging in a light, let it now be grounded in a new way, this energy system that is yours and your body or your many bodies. And gently allow the similar kind of countervalent force to gravity to float you back up from your belly to your heart to your head. And just notice again the flower of your lily. You might even see that it's actually like pretty tall, right? It actually can flower all the way up to the top of your head. And notice just that natural sense of a plant's wisdom in growing up towards the light, growing up towards the sky, almost like it loves the sky. It wants to push into the sky. You can let that metaphor be sexual or erotic. And as you open yourself to the sky, allow your energy to float up. Follow a similarly sure and straight path, though there may be some curves for sure, as you did going down all the way up into the sky. Pierce through the weather, or rather maybe flow through the weather above you, whatever that looks like. Flow out of the atmosphere into the velvety darkness of space around the planet and start to move at the speed of light and thought and concept. Move through the sun and as our more local representation of light, or if it's night where you are, move through the moon. Move through the blankets and webs of stars that exist in our galaxy and in our cosmos, and reach up to that highest layer of being and existence that is the pure yang reflection of the pure yin of the center of the earth. Reach up to the highest power. Move gently with all the love and respect, but with a lot of confidence through any stories you have about what the divine is or isn't, about who can access the divine and who can't. Move through them just like you move through the weather and touch that heart of the divine. Touch that place where there is radiance and warmth and light and love and compassion, and a really expansive perspective that sees all. Touch that place of movement and sound and animation, that place that is excited and ecstatic and wants to express itself. And as you touch in there, see that it is reflected in you already and that you are reflected in some way in it. And plug in, just like you plugged in your grounding cord into the center of the earth, plug this celestial cord into the center of the universe, the highest power, the heart of the divine. And just feel how strong that fastening is, even if this is your first time ever doing it. Feel how that's actually a birthright. And just notice the movement now up and down of energy, the exchange that you have now completed as a circuit between earth below, heaven above, and you in the center. Follow that flow all the way back down towards your body, moving and gathering all the radiance of the stars and the moons and the suns. Letting that flow into your head and your heart and your belly. And just start to notice how the energies of the above and the below, maybe they're gold and silver, or maybe they're rainbow and brown, maybe they're, any other combination of textures that your imagination shows you. Notice how those energies flow together, that they're polarities, but they're not opposites, they're complements. Let them wash and radiate and warm and strengthen and stabilize. Let the energies of the above bless you and protect you. And let the energies of the below connect you and stabilize you and fortify you. And trust that these energies are old and ancient lovers. They're old and ancient essential sources of energy and existence. So they know, they have their own wisdom. Just like the lily has the wisdom of receiving these energies have the wisdom of being received and balancing themselves. It's particularly relevant to whatever you need in this moment. And as they swirl around you and within you, just take this last few moments that we have in this practice and fan that energy out into your boundaries. Notice that sphere that is yours and only yours, that delineates the space between you and everyone else and everything else. And imagine that as an act of love and grace and compassion to claim your space, to let the energies of the earth and the energies of the sky flow into your boundaries and resource them and recharge them. Not a shield, not an airlock, not something that keeps you separate, but actually something that allows you to connect in a healthy way. Like a membrane, let it receive what you need and release what you don't. And just imagine as our last piece that anything that's in your body right now that doesn't need to be there, will that to flow out and down to the earth and blow that up into a million little pieces of light to be recycled. Or if it feels better, flow it all the way up to the highest power and blow that up to the highest power to be recycled and made new. Let that be just like pooping, an natural, normal, healthy, and sacred act of release and movement and recycling. And just take a moment to settle back into yourself, to notice this new state of grounding and connection that you have created through your choice. And as you settle into that, just let your body show you anything that it needs to show you before we shift gears and shift focus. And if it feels right, you can give a little thanks. Thank you, body. Thank you, earth below. Thank you, sky above. And then we'll step out of that space and move into the rest of the call. So just take a moment, let that land. If you're just joining us, we just did an energy practice of connecting to the earth and connecting to the sky. And if you've been following me for a bit, you've probably done this with me. So feel free to just do your own quick version if that's something you want to check in with. One thing to notice as we do energy practices like this is that, well, one thing to just know is that we live in a culture that doesn't teach this kind of stuff. And when it is taught, it's kind of taught in pretty warped and kind of weird ways. And we won't go into that too much. So if you have stuff that comes up that's super normal, I think one of the reasons why I love this stuff and why I want to teach it so much, why it's really the core of what I want to teach, is because it makes everything else, it's sort of necessary for everything else, because it's the most immediate and effective and trustworthy way that I've found to have a diagnostic into what's going on with me. Like I shared earlier, in practicing movement practices, like I was steeped in yoga for many, many years and teaching yoga, postural yoga at least. I would encounter all kind of weird stuff energetically, emotionally, that my teachers that were kind of very secularized, westernized, etc., like decontextualized yoga teachers, just had no vocabulary for. And what's really cool, now I study with shamanic teachers, right? And they have this very extensive energetic vocabulary, but they don't do a lot of diagnosing for me in terms of my day-to-day. I think a lot of folks, we encounter these spiritual teachers that are like, oh, that's what that is, based on their interpretation of their symbolic language. But really the essence of what I believe, if we are to be responsible spiritual adults in this world, is that we have to be willing and able to constantly be checking in and diagnosing what's going on for ourselves, within ourselves. And so I consider that super important, which is why I'm obsessed with the energy body practices that that was just a little sliver. That's kind of just our most basic kind of checking in kind of thing. So hopefully we'll just keep building on them. What I would really ask is for folks that are actually engaging with these recordings consistently. I know there's like a handful of you, and I really appreciate that, to just check in with me via email and let me know how things are going. Let me know what stuff feels hard. Let me know what stuff feels good. Because as you guys check in with me, I can treat this sort of like a more diffuse classroom space, and we can build effectively on, in terms of adding complexity and adding, things that are a little more advanced. But if I don't ever hear from you, then I don't really know. So then I just have to keep teaching only to the lowest common denominator. So I'd love for us to keep building. And again, you're going to get to a point where we need to step forward and either move into a session together, or I can recommend you towards the classes that my teachers teach, which have hundreds of people in them, and they're super fun. They have a really robust and vibrant community of students that are engaging them. And there's a really cool deal that my teachers do, so that if you pay for the class once, you get access to it anytime it happens, which is usually yearly, for the rest of your life. So basically, there's people taking these teachings over and over and over and building on them and deepening them. And we're all kind of moving together, both beginners and experts and everyone in between. So it's really fun. So I would love to, keep funneling people towards that. And if you'd like to move through this stuff in more of a small group space with me, for whatever reasons, which I think there's a lot of good reasons to do that. And so I would encourage you to reach out about that. That eventually could also funnel in. There's a ramp to the larger community without you having to like pay twice or whatever. So just let me know how it's going. But notice anything, again, the reason I started saying all of that is that stuff is going to come up. We all have a lot of internalized stories, or we tend to, about both grounding, connecting to the earth and connecting to the divine and God and all of that stuff. And even just being in our bodies, checking in. There's all the, you might notice like a million tiny little voices like, help me. So that's normal. If you're first, if this is like new for you, this kind of work. And if any of it feels really problematic, you need help with it, please reach out. But for now, if you're just kind of just dipping your toe in, start to use the framework of like, isn't it interesting? I'm noticing that blank. Isn't it interesting? I'm sensing something in me that feels like this. And just start to notice, write it down, journal it, whatever, or just notice it. But because the noticing is really the way forward, because these teachings actually bring us from just the energy cultivation into actually learning to clear and integrate things that are stuck and needing more focused attention. But the first step of that is noticing. So I'd encourage all of that. Okay, what should I talk about now? And of course, if there are any questions for folks that are here live, feel free to type them in the chat. or raise your hand. And at any time, you can also email me questions. And I'm just going to check and see if anyone is, yeah, cool. So let's see. So shifting into what else I want to talk about today, since I don't have any questions. So I have given a newfound attention to my practice, my teaching practice. And so I wanted to frame why I'm doing that, and what it really is, what are these services? Because I think sometimes they can just seem kind of, random. And, there's a lot of people offering astrology readings, but what does that mean exactly? So we'll just talk about that. So I'm teaching more now because I need to make money. And I had 2 years of unemployment on the pandemic, and that was really awesome because I've been working full time since I was 16. That was like 18 years or whatever at that point. And I really needed that time and space to work on myself, to dive deep into my process. I've been writing another book, so I've been doing a lot of that, to give a lot of time to my community, my spiritual community, and actually give a lot of time to training to teach some of this stuff without the pressure of a full-time job, which is what I'd been doing previously for, my whole life, like most of us, unless you have certain economic privileges, right? And so it seems timely, that the money's running out. But there's also just this thing, because I can at any time just kind of veer back into the workforce. I'm pretty comfortable doing that. And that's kind of a dangerous comfort for me, because there is a consistent flow upwards from my work with the earth and my work with my own purpose and my own sort of dream as it lives in the earth and is being dreamed by the earth. That I need to stick myself out there and do this stuff that makes me really uncomfortable. I'm pretty comfortable as an artist, and I hope to sell this book, and I hope it to have like a wider release than my first book did. But I'm not finished with that. But and yeah, it makes me seriously uncomfortable to share this book that I've spent many years now writing. It's like way more intimate and vulnerable of a piece of work than the book that I wrote when I was 25 was, obviously, because now I'm 35, and I'm upgrading my capacity to be intimate with myself. But what really makes me somehow even more uncomfortable, which is kind of odd considering the fact that I was in essence a spiritual teacher full time for like 5-6 years, is sharing this stuff, because it's so core now to what I believe in and what's helped me. And so a practice that I want to talk about, actually, and we'll do this practice too in a second here. A practice that I want to talk about, we call it split screening in our community. It's a practice of holding the complexity of the vision we're trying to manifest and the current reality. So just the brass tacks, what is here and now, what is true for us, for me personally, what is true for the world. So it's really common that like communities that are trying to create change, activist communities, spiritual communities, or individuals that are trying to create change tend to collapse in either direction. We either have this really visionary focus and we're really 100 steps out into the future. And there's even like a lot of intense dissent and conflict so there's the way out in the future with the vision, and there's the way too stuck in current reality, and maybe even like we can't even make a single first step out of current reality because we're just so burdened by how overwhelming and intense and how present and real current reality is. And so you see this like a lot in like criminal justice reform and stuff like that, where there's the folks that are like, I'm a total abolitionist, I can only live in this world where all prisons are completely obsolete and dismantled, and there's nothing resembling a police state whatsoever. And anyone who's not willing to go there with me right now is a horrible collaborating, narc. And then there's the people here in current reality who we consider in that kind of circle, in abolitionist circles, they're often called like reformers versus, abolitionists, who are like, well, I don't think we can get there right now today or tomorrow, but we can take these next few steps. But then when they trend towards conservatism, it becomes, well, you guys are actually too radical and you're hurting the movement because you're actually making people think that we're too radical and revolutionary and da 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 da. And so it just becomes this constant back and forth, right? And so I think if actually, with these energy practices, as a foundation, this practice of split screening can help us to stay in a current time and evolving relationship with the vision of what we're trying to manifest, which personally, just so you know, I am 100% trying to manifest a fully abolished prison system and a fully dismantled military industrial complex. I want total US disarmament now. And I'm a double Aquarius. So like I trend towards the visionary piece. I trend towards the 100 steps in the future piece. But with this practice, it has really helped me to ground that I can stay in relationship with that vision of disarmament and demilitarization and decolonization and all of that, while also being in relationship with current reality, not collapse into either pole, and actually use that as a way to divine next steps, and to also see the places where I'm stuck still in relationship to all of that. So this is what we call split screening. And so I really fought this practice when it was first introduced to me, and it really has been so pivotal. So it's kind of funny. It's actually pretty obvious at this point. If I really fight something initially, then I probably need it. It's really pivotal for me with issues that are up in my family right now, where, someone I really, really love and respect and appreciate is causing harm. And I'm having to hold both the real-time harm that this person is doing and the real-time love and my vision of that person who actually is a loving person, fully expressed and not harming us through their expression of themselves. And I'm having to hold this practice with my book because the book itself is like really incomplete at this moment. And I'm on my third really messy draft. And well, it's actually way less messy than the last two, obviously. But I still have this vision of the completed work. And so I have to hold those in relationship and see how they kind of dance and move within my body, help me to move so that each day I'm actually taking actionable steps instead of like getting obsessed over how messy it is, or just getting overwhelmed by how far my current manuscript is from like this beautiful thing that I see in the future. It's helpful for myself within my own process in terms of I have this larger vision of my life where my writing and my teaching flow together really beautifully. And my writing allows me to go around the country and teach people how to, put themselves in mythopoetic frameworks in a way that actually creates actionable transformation in their lives, and then actually creates, generates abundance for their communities and da 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 da. Like, there's all these things that I want to do, and clearly I'm not doing all of them right now. I'm just starting my little YouTube show up again. And I don't have a steady stream of income, and I'm kind of like, shit. So being able to not collapse. And it also really helps me in terms of engaging with the culture, because I'm someone that's very, very obsessed, not obsessed. I'm very like connected to, sometimes obsessed, the current events of the world around me, and particularly to the outsized impact that United States government and United States policy and pop culture have on the rest of the world, and the outsized impacts of my consumption on the rest of the world, and particularly as a white person and a white passing person, white presenting. And so it allows me to be in current reality of what's really sucks and what's really beautiful about this country, and in particular about Kansas City, where I live at the moment right now. And it allows me to be in the vision of the world with, for me, it's the vision of my spiritual community, last mass community, fully manifest and flourishing in the world, which essentially is a vision that everyone has access to these transformational practices in a way that is agnostic, that is open and accessible, in a way that is effective and grounded, and helps communities and individuals come into alignment with the dreaming of the earth in a way that is good and true and beautiful for all life. Just that, you know what I mean? Just that little easy, simple vision. And so it allows me to not collapse again between, wow, everything sucks. And, some things are good. And this thing that these manifold changes that I would like to create in the world. So let's do split screening. Let's just try it, because what I want is for you to have an experience of it just briefly, so that you can kind of feel where I'm at and how I'm moving through this kind of process, and feel that you actually have a next step. Because what I would love is that everyone that leaves this call, and any call of mine that they join or listen to, has like an actionable next step that they can take in the world, in their life, towards their own growth or healing or activism or whatever the hell it is, wherever you're at, and no shade, right? Wherever it is, if you're in a growth process, you just got to be in that, right? And if you're in a healing process, you just got to be in that. And hopefully those things are moving synergistically into your activism, into your action in the world. And it's usually not just one or the other, but we do tend to move through cycles and seasons. So it's another way that this process can be really helpful. It's to kind of just assess for us, where are we, in the schema of what we're doing. So just take a moment and close your eyes again if that feels resonant for you. And check back in with your grounding and the connection that you have with the energy of the divine, and the steady flow up and down, and all the movement of energy flowing throughout your body and into your boundaries, and really sink in. And especially if you need to reinforce that grounding, as most of us do, even after like 15 minutes, just do that. And then take a moment here and just allow your senses to fan out and begin to show you, what is your current reality. Notice the events of the world that are most affecting your life. Feel with your emotions the ones that kind of hurt, that are actually breaking your heart. And feel into the ones that are actually feeding your heart and helping to lift you up and helping you to go on when you want to give up. And allow your imagination to just run with that for a few moments, to just really feel into what is real, what is true, what is current for your reality. For some of us, that's very collective. For some of us, it's very personal. It's all good. Just feel into it. And then hold that. You might think of your left hand as holding that like a stone or something like that. So that's your current reality hand. And then invite the earth being, the earth dreamer, the earth great goddess Gaia, and her biggest sense, or their biggest sense. Invite the earth to show you the vision of the better future that you hold a piece of. Might be the vision of an activist community that you're a part of, or a cause that you really believe in. It might be just averting catastrophe, or, the simple survival of the species. Or it might be something really personal. Let the earth, or open the possibility that the earth could show you the vision of what the world would be if you manifested your life's vision in its fullest, truest, most authentic and beautiful sense. And just notice how that shifts your perception. Notice the feeling of that vision. What is beautiful about it? What tugs at your heartstrings? What is so great about it that it actually breaks your heart in a different way? What does that vision have to do for the children coming? For the non-humans? For the quality of the air we breathe, the water we drink? What is the better future that you hold an essential piece of? Just notice all the different qualities of that: sound, texture, taste, sight, emotions. And now, before we get lost in the vision of the better future, hold that in your right hand. And come back into your body and come back into that sort of central place between head and heart and belly, held by the earth below and the sky above. And hold both of those two qualities fully and firmly in balance. Both current reality on the left side, if that's how you see it, or sometimes I see it like back and front, but current reality on the left side of what is true and immediate and real now. And the beauty and goodness and truth and all the, complexity and all the things that maybe aren't so perfect still about the better future that you're dreaming of. And start to let those mix and mingle. Start to let them grate on one another and come into creative tension. Holding those two polarities, feel what comes up. Do sparks fly? Is there a particular quality that the two of them merge into and create? Is there a place in you where they can't quite touch that needs your attention? Just notice what happens. Notice the energy generated, the friction, and see if that energy can actually give you a tangible action that you can take towards the manifestation of that better future from your current reality as you now know it. It doesn't have to be super big. In fact, it's probably more truthful if it's not. Just notice that. And it's okay if you don't get anything right now. You can always come back and try this more times. Notice how that friction sparks your creativity, sparks your imagination. What is the next step towards the manifestation of that better future that you can imagine right now? And again, feel free to come back to this whenever you need to. We'll start to shift focus here. So thank the vision, thank the earth, thank the above for holding you in that practice. And just imagine you're just kind of flushing with the energy of the earth and the sky and cleansing and clearing. But if there's something that came forward that you feel like you want to hold on to, maybe hold on to that, blow it into your heart. Or if you have like a sacred space in your home, maybe blow it into that sacred space where you tend your relationship to the sacred, or like a piece of jewelry or something, something that you love where you would feel comfortable holding like some energy, a stone or crystal. Yeah, feel free if it's something that wants to be kept. But if it's something that wants to be given back, just trust that feeling and give it back. And as you feel ready, we'll shift focus back out into listening consciousness. Thank you so much for joining me in that. And so if you have questions about what came up during that practice or reflections, feel free to chat those at me. I don't think YouTube comments are a great way to leave those. I would rather just have email, probably, or maybe comments on my Instagram. I don't look at the YouTube comments very often. But if that's your only way, feel free. I'm sure I'll find them eventually. I'll try to turn the notifications on. So in my split screening over and over and over, it shows me, yeah, I got to keep writing this book. But what the vision of what I see of my life is really about a new vision of what an artist is. So not only an artist as someone who receives messages from spirit and expresses them on behalf of the collective and wrestles with them and tries to make sense of them and destroy them and all the things that, artists do. I don't think that's the only thing an artist can be. That's just a new vision for me of what my experience of being an artist is. The old way that I think I would like to move away from is artist as someone who can only churn out a material commodity, artist as sort of accomplice to capitalism, that kind of thing. Artist as like hyper individualistic misanthrope. I'm trying to leave that behind. So I'm really trying to hold my art in balance with what I consider my service and my teaching, which is, the things that I do that share what I have to the collective in a way that's different than art. Because, a novel has the reason I'm writing a novel. I think part of the reason that I have continually justified why I want to write this novel, other than the fact that I just kind of have received it as a download from spirit. And it's really about, it's really how the process has been me making sense of really hard times in my life through the vessel of fiction, and receiving sort of this more archetypal quality to that releases it from just what happened to me. Because, my last book was pretty strict nonfiction, kind of like almost like journalistic, except for not within any integrity. Sorry about that. But, but, when releasing it from the nonfiction frame, it actually allows it to take on these dimensions that are much more mythic. And so, yeah, I would love to share that quality and that process with people. But there's a way in which I love novels so much, because they have got me through experiences that no amount of teaching, classes, practices can. A novel. I'm thinking of when I was first beginning to question my alcoholism, and I read both Eat, Pray, Love, which maybe that's not exactly a novel, but I read that book, and I read White Oleander, because I found them both at a thrift store, right? And I read The Birth Grave by Tanith Lee around that same time. And they really helped me to situate these sort of struggles as like a beleaguered femme with a lot of issues with my mom, and mothers in general, into this frame that helped me to move through that experience of my life at the time. Another book that came across my path maybe around 2018, 2019 was gosh, what is it called? Oh, The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. Oof, so just like just landing so hard. And just exactly what I needed to hear and read and feel, and just what I needed to experience myself through at the time. I'm trying to think offhand if there's any other books that have really been super pivotal for me like that. Temple of My Familiar by Alice Walker. That was a really big one. Like, so, that's why I'm writing, because I love writing. I love working with words, but I really care about novels, and I think that they have a power to change in ways that other things don't. But the thing is, I also think that teaching has a real necessity, and I am nothing and no one without my teachers, period. Like, I just am not. And I think that actually truly spiritually informed teaching is this, we've really gone so far astray from having that in a healthy way in our culture. And I think that's one of the big things that our culture really lacks for. And this makes people really uncomfortable. And I think rightly so, because there's a ton of people that are either performing the impression of looking like someone spiritual, or actually connected to spirit, but abusing those relationships in some way that are really violent and abusive. And you guys know, I mean, some of you may know about my heavy investment over the years in the program called Yoga to the People, and how ugly that was when I left because of the abuse of the founder. And and how ugly it was for me to reconcile the fact that I was actually complicit in that by investing so much into that program. So I get it, you know what I mean? And I get it when people have a knee-jerk secularism, because I think it's hard to find anyone in this country who hasn't experienced religious violence, even in some very subtle and sort of pervasive ambient way. I grew up in Kansas City. There's a lot of fundamentalist Christians jumping down my throat 24/7. There's this kid, I probably talked about this before. There's this kid that followed me around my high school, quoting Bible passages at me to try and save me. And the fact that no teacher stopped him wasn't in and of itself a violence. The fact that that was normalized behavior was just insane. It was insane in the early 2000s, and certainly I hope it would be insane now, but you never know, depending on where you are. And so I get it. Spirit stuff makes people really uncomfortable, and yet I've been seeing spirits for my whole goddamn life. What I mean? That's really uncomfortable. But it's made way less uncomfortable in a unhealthy sense, and way more workable for me because of the training that I've experienced by working with my shamanic teachers, Christina Pratt, of the Last Mass Center, Langston Kahn, Last Mass Center. So there are ways to hold spirit relationships and share spirit information with integrity. And my hypothesis is that we need to actually rediscover those ways, because we can't just do it with science. Because what we've seen is that science is really good at making vaccines. It's really not good at helping us to understand why people won't take them. Um, it sucks. It's also really not good at helping us to understand why, even in the face of data saying that to not open up the patents to the vaccine and not share the vaccine equitably with the world actually is dangerous for all of us, we still refuse to do so. So that's, there's a limit to the scientific worldview, and there's a limit to the practice of science, just like there's a limit to the practices of spirit. I don't purport to make vaccines with my spiritual practice. And, I don't fucking want to. I don't want to take anyone's life in my hands in that way. Yeah. So it's just a different thing. And I think that I think that human history bears stamps of many different influences. And one of the major ones is spirit relationships. And for me, spirit occupies kind of a similar place sometimes in terms of how I use the word as energy does, because it's a place that is not purely immaterial, but it's also not purely physical, and it connects multiple aspects of who we are, and it allows us to interrelate. So energy maybe is a more given what I already defined earlier, energy is maybe a more accurate way of describing this. So I think that it's important that we work with both the energy of what's happening in the world and the matter, but we work with both the emotions and the thought forms and the belief systems and the ideologies and the psychology. I think if we don't, we lose. So that's why I'm doing this, but I don't really have to convince most of you, because most of you are here because you've already kind of figured out that that's sort of true for your life. I don't think it's necessarily true for everyone, and that's fine. So I'm a spirit worker, not a scientist, but my shamanic teacher was herself a scientist and was trained in that way. And so the way in which I am trained, and I think, all the best spirit workers are really, really, really rigorously scientific with what they're doing. Does it work? Does it grow corn, to borrow from like an indigenous saying? Does it actually yield the results, and the willingness to even just look and see, did that do what I wanted it to do, versus to just be like, well, my intentions were good. There's a lot of different fail safes that my teachers have built around this work over their many decades of practice that I am now learning to pick up. And to be honest, I was fucking intimidated when I first started with these teachers, because they were so legit and I couldn't bullshit them. And it still drives me nuts sometimes when I just want someone to like pat me on the back and tell me that like, oh, it's fine. You know what I mean? Or just like, tell me the rules, just tell me how to do it. And they're like, no, you got to figure this part out for yourself. And no, that's not fine. You caused harm, so that's the uncomfortable place where we all need to grow into being, and that requires a level of interconnection within the self that I think these practices offer. So what am I offering in my last 20 minutes? Since no one is here with questions, I am doing astrology and divination. So divination is the practice of asking questions of spirit. Spirits are, to borrow from Christina's terminology, coherent energy patterns. And they're these coherent energy patterns that we can relate to, and they tend to take forms that are, relatable to us, and they help us to engage the larger systems of reality in a way that we couldn't in any other way. So that we couldn't just by like measuring it scientifically, and we couldn't just by thinking about it. So it's a way of engaging with the symbolic nature of reality in a way that actually yields actionable change. So my divination is always question-based and action-focused. It's not just this sort of masturbatory, like, please tell me more about myself, forever and ever and ever until, my eyes gloss over. And then I'm just going to go back and, eat my like $35 kale salad, with no understanding of where that came from. So not to be shady. So astrology is the framework that I use. It's the main framework that I use for divination. Some other forms of divination you may be familiar with are like tarot cards. Cowrie shells is like a common one from the African diasporic traditions. Runes is the sort of Euro version that a lot of people know, or casting staves, little pieces of wood. So astrology, I consider the framework. The difference that between me and many astrologers is that I'm actually operating my astrology practice within the psychocosmology, which is the shamanic cosmology that I study within. So I'm not a perfect embodiment of that cosmology by any means. I'm kind of half baked in terms of moving through my training process. And I'll be endeavoring to become a more perfect expression of that cosmology in these teachings throughout my life. That's kind of the commitment I've made. But I have enough of the sense of it, and I've given enough years. I've been with them almost 5 years, or going on 4 or 5, somewhere around there, years. So I'm interpreting my messages from spirit via astrology through my shamanic cosmology, through the lens of this cosmology. The key point that I think makes that radically different than what many astrologers are doing is that the first thing is that most astrologers don't know that, aren't even really sensing into whether they're in a cosmology or not, or what cosmology they're interpreting their messages from. So I think that tends to be, there's sometimes this sense of like, well, astrology is itself a cosmology, but it's like kind of not, because every cosmology has an astrology. Every cosmology ever known to man, to humankind, has, includes the planets, in some sense, and includes the stars and stuff. It's a pretty myopic cosmology if it doesn't. A good example of that would be Christianity, which is like, nope, there's nothing up there. Don't look up there. Fundamentalist Christianity, at least. But even like the Judaic traditions, Muslim traditions are often actually very lunar. They're moving through the lunar calendar. So actually that's kind of the foundation of Christianity. But so a lot of people, they're kind of operating within this kind of patchwork default cosmology of like some New Age stuff, some Hellenistic ancient Greek astrology stuff, and then in polytheist stuff, maybe some pagan stuff. And then sort of where the gaps come in, they'll probably fill in the gaps unconsciously from something that's actually very Judeo-Christian, or very sort of post-Christian, secular, capitalist, whatever, industrialized, So those cosmologies tend to be incomplete. They tend to be not helpful. That's where you tend to hear things like, well, this is a malefic. This is a bad placement. This is bad. Or the 12th house is just where all the bad stuff is. And so I don't read anything like that. I'm reading from this orientation towards soul growth, towards connectivity, towards animism, where everything has a voice and a face and a personhood, towards alignment with the earth streaming. So there's a lot of different ways in which my cosmology actually resources me to actually interpret messages very differently. And that's not to say that I'm better or worse. I have much less direct astrological training. I have a lot more shamanic training than some folks, that are very like, and these Hellenistic folks, they're really cool because they can look at your chart and they'll be like, oh, your mother has a hangnail on her right toe or something. They're like really, really detail oriented, but still the why is always kind of missing. So why do I need to know about my mother's hangnail? You know what I mean? And what am I doing? I think it tends to collapse back into fear, because it's like, well, this bad thing is going to happen on this date, and this bad thing is going to happen on this date. And so I'm just holding on. I'm just going to survive these bad things as best I can. So that's not the cosmology that I work with. And, the essence of our cosmology is that each person chooses to be here incarnate as a body and a soul, so that they can live their soul's purpose in a way that gives back to the earth and enriches the fabric of the whole dreaming of all of reality in their living and endeavoring to live their soul's purpose. So that's a whole different reframe. And who do I do these readings for? Anyone. And I think they're really good as starters for people that are really new to a spiritual path and they're trying to find a healthy sense, a healthy grounding in some, like, just some good, reasonable information that they can work with and grow with about who they are and how they kind of tend to fundamentally operate. It's a way of beginning to look at your energy without directly looking at your energy, and put it into language in a way that can actually be like understood and worked with. Like the first time I figured out my Mars was in Aries in the third house, it was like, oh, that's why I get so pissed about everyday stuff. And when I encounter challenges in my day-to-day stuff, I explode and I act like a child. Yeah, so nowadays I have a much more refined way of working with that energy and accessing those children that are exploding and integrating them, etc. But it's a good starter for that. But I also really love reading people that know a ton about themselves and actually already have these really coherent energetic practices, because then it lands in a different soil, so it can bear fruit in either direction, but just I think it's for anyone. And so if you have questions you want to explore, if you're really going through some shit and you don't know how to make heads or tails of it, the astrology is really good for that. I love it more than tarot and things like that, because astrology always has the quality of weather. We always have the movement of the planets, and we always have our own personal birth chart where they were when we were born. So you get both. You get the interplay between personal and collective in a really big sense. It's a way to help to depersonalize things that feel like I'm being victimized, but it's actually just a very collective experience. And it's also a way to really begin to look at the ways in which I project what is personal to me onto the collective and onto others in relationship with me. I also think astrology itself has a really helpful map for a holistic cosmology. So it aligns really well with my shamanic cosmology, because the 12 houses really do, if you really dig into them, map a very complete system of what a human is. You need both first house self, seventh house other, 12th house spirit, and everything in between. You know what I mean? You really need all of it to be in balance as a human. And so I think the house system is just brilliant in and of itself. I'm obsessed with it. And I think, to be honest, I believe that astrology was originally developed and practiced within a full and coherent cosmology historically. It's just that by the time we even got to ancient Greece, by the time they were writing this stuff down, it had already been oral tradition for probably hundreds or thousands of years. But ancient Greece was a horrible place. They had slaves, you know what I mean? They were, not a healthy culture by any means. So, we don't really want to consider that like a healthy blueprint of like urbanized human life. So yeah, astrology readings, you can book them on my website. Power retrieval and spirit work is sometimes the next step. Power retrieval is like a shamanic healing form that is one that is probably the only true healing form that I'm not allowed, but I'm initiated enough to actually be able to offer with integrity. And it's where I go through a shamanic journey, and I ask for who your spirit help is. And I actually get you in connection with your spirit help. And a lot of it requires more contextual work, where then we'll do some clearing work about why weren't you in relationship with your spirit help already? What blocks were there that need to be addressed either ritually or through energetic practice? And I always want to also work with people and go the distance with them enough to figure out how we work with the spirit help in a healthy way. Because for those of us that weren't born with these traditions like myself, working with helping spirits has been quite a ride, and I'm still learning. And part of my learning is, me also helping others along the way. And I'm just, a few steps forward along the path than most people. But yeah, so I love doing that stuff. I think it's so fun and so cool and so interesting. And so I would love to do more of those with folks. That's also for everyone, for anyone who has an inkling of if the hypothesis that every single person has helping spirits who are solely concerned with helping you live your life better and helping you express your soul's purpose in this lifetime, and blessing and protecting you in doing that. If that hypothesis is compelling for you and you don't know how to find those spirits on your own, reach out and we'll work on it. I usually start by offering, here's a way that you can do this on your own. And if you can't wrangle that, then that's where I would step in and do a power retreat. Yeah. But shamanically, it's understood that if you're not connected to your helping spirits in some way, then that actually in and of itself is an illness. So yeah. So, but all of that leads into, and then just briefly, I am doing birth tending, which is something that I also feel really strongly about, but I still have a lot of background work that I need to complete before I can bring that online fully in a good way. I've just been doing it within my family for babies that are born, bless their little hearts, which is where I stand on the threshold between pre-life and birth and help the spiritual transition. I'm not in the room unless a mother, bless her or them, wants me to be in the room. And that's a possibility. But for the most part, this is done non-locally with the spirit of the child. And so basically making sure that the spirit of the child knows that, this is an archetypal function of a human, is to tend birth, just like we tend death. And I do have the capacity to tend death. I just don't feel as drawn to really jump into that right now. But if you find that someone is crossing over and you'd like that to go in a good way, you can also reach out. But if you're pregnant, or if someone is, and you would like that child to have the archetypal need of the living fulfilled for them in their birth being spiritually tended, please reach out, because it's something that I'm loving doing. And I think it's really important because some kids like myself really suffered for not having that. And then I offer like remote space clearing and land work, which again, this is stuff that I'm guiding you to do. It's not so much stuff that I'm going in and doing on my own, unless there's something really heavy that actually needs to be moved energetically. And I haven't encountered that yet. It's more like, me engage. I haven't done a lot of it, but other than in my own personal practice and with my family, but it's me engaging the spirits of the land where you live and the spirits of your space, and just assessing what kind of patterns are there that are not helpful, what actually the land wants, like what kind of offerings, what kind of relationship, or does it just want to be left alone? Does it even want to be lived on? That kind of thing. But all of this is best effective with the energy body mastery and energy body clearing work. So I consider all of this to feed us and necessitate us in creating a common working language about how to work with and cultivate our energy and how to diagnose what's going on. And then the next step is the clearing practice, which is accessing the traumas, the triggers, the stuckness, the weirdness, the bullshit that gets stuck in our energy, usually from childhood, and learning how to give the right presencing to that, to actually let that stuff move and change and transform. And I'll probably talk more about this next time, because it's kind of a really central piece, and I've kind of just shoved it into the last 7 minutes here. But it's key for working with spirit effectively from my perspective. I think it's key for really, really learning to receive divination. I really think that divination is another archetypal function of human culture that we've kind of lost in our culture again. It's Miss Cleo doesn't quite cut it for most of us, or like whatever, angel cards or whatever. So nothing against angel cards or Miss Cleo, but so learning to receive messages from spirit really, really is best done with like a healthy energetic hygiene practice and clearing practice, so that the messages are not getting stuck on the traumas from the past. And if you're just one of those people that just feels like you have figured it all out and you have a really like vast articulation of your trauma, and you actually have a really high level like way of languaging it, and you've worked on it in therapy, and yet you still find yourself in moments feeling like, wow, that driver just cut me off in traffic and it feels like that time my dad did blah blah blah, or wow, I read this article and I'm so triggered and I'm shaking and I'm going into like almost a PTSD response, etc. Or wow, I'm really flying off the handle inappropriately about things that I've experienced over and over, even though I know in my mind that these are actually just kind of like microaggressions or whatever. If you find yourself responding habitually inappropriately to the moment, if you find yourself in a situation where people are having to tiptoe around your triggers and you're tiptoeing around theirs, that's not normal. And that is a sign that a healing process needs to be completed. It's normal relative to our culture. It's not healthy. Sorry. So that's sucky thing, but it is. And it's actually not that sucky, because it's actually really easy and fun to learn how to really heal this stuff for yourself. It's always diagnostic and helping you access larger healing processes that are needed. But there is a piece that we must always be doing and responsible for doing ourselves. So that's the stuff that this is like the core of my stuff that I love and care about. And I'm willing to offer it to anyone, regardless of an ability to pay, because I find it really, really important. And that's just my pledge to these teachings, because my better future is a future where people are not running away from life because it triggers them, but actually learning to access those triggers as the lessons that they are, as the on ramps that they are, in the inroads that they are into your own past, so that you can become more clear internally and actually move out and respond to those situations in a new way. Because we don't need people to just be responding in the old ways. We really don't need people to shrink their lives and pad them around their trauma. We really need people to be able to be resilient enough to stand up and make new choices. So that's what I pray for. So if you feel like you're interested in doing any of this stuff, or you're really challenged by it and you just want to like rant about how much it sucks, you can send me an email and check out my website. And the best way, I think, for me to grow my practice is for you to share specifically, like one-on-one with those friends, or maybe in that group chat you got going with those friends that you really think would like personally resonate with this work, because those are the folks that I need to work with, I think. Because if you get that little twinkle that they might appreciate it, they're probably the ones, right? So just, send them my way. That's my biggest ask right now, beyond donations, is to make the referrals so that I can grow this practice. I can't handle 100 clients a month. I need about 10. So it's like, so that's, that's doable. We just got to do it. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate all that have already worked with me and trusted me, especially in the years past when I was still stumbling around and trying to figure this shit out. And I appreciate you working with me in my current stumblings and figuring things out. And I hope to work with you and see you again in my little Zoom room, or feel you non-locally access this Zoom room at some other time. So thank you for being here. Let's do a quick closing, step out of the energy space. So I invite each of us to withdraw from this circle that we've stepped into, anything that we need to take back with us, and invite us to also release to the earth below and the sky above anything that's ready to be recycled and doesn't want to come back into the day with us. And I give great honoring and thanks and gratitude to all the spirits that have gathered to resource us and help me to contain this space, spirits below and above, spirits of the earth and the air and the fire and the water and the heart within, all the animals, plants, insects, and humans that contributed to us having this, all the resources that were used in us accessing this online, spirit of technology, elder fire for holding the space in the center, our ancestral helping spirits and our helping spirits and the spirits of the land where each of us reside. Thank you all so much. Go if you must, stay if you can. We release you with love and gratitude. We dissolve this circle. We all take action to step out of the circle and move back into our bodies and move out into our day in a good way. Thank you all so much. Hope to see you soon.